Hi, class. I hope you're all having a nice day and you are looking forward to restarting Romeo and Juliet today. I figured I'd start today with just a brief summary of what we already knew about Romeo and Juliet and just kind of refresh our memories about just particularly today, Acts 1 and 2. Acts 3, 4, and 5, we haven't really read yet. We read a little bit of Act 3 in some classes, but not all. So for the next few days, we'll be doing activities, we'll be doing discussions based on Acts 3, 4, and 5 of Romeo and Juliet. I really did want to finish this story for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of important just to understand references in literature in future classes and references in even life sometimes that have to do with Romeo and Juliet. So to understand the story is kind of key to understanding the next few literature classes you might have, or next, or certain things in life eventually. So let's dive right into it. I have something kind of interesting to show you halfway through as well that I found, and then I'll explain your assignment for today and what you're doing. So Romeo and Juliet, we'll do a very quick recap and then we'll go from there. So Act 1, you might remember the very beginning of Romeo and Juliet. It opens with the servants of those two opposing houses, the Capulets and the Montagues. They get into a fight on the streets, and we hear the biting of the thumb, and that reminds us of the fight. They got into the fight, and it resulted in an all-out brawl between the two families eventually. So the Capulets, Montagues, mortal enemies, fight on the streets. The prince was the only one able to break up this fight, promising death to the next person to fight on these streets. So he said, "He who disturbs the peace of these streets in the future shall be put to death." Prince, sick of this kind of fighting on the streets. Now with Q and Benvolio, Romeo's cousin. He was talking to Romeo's dad about how depressed Romeo's been lately. All Romeo does, Benvolio says, is just sit around in his room alone in the dark all day. He mopes around the garden. They're concerned about Romeo until Romeo comes into the scene and kind of explains why he's been acting that way. He's so depressed because of Rosaline. We remember her, the beautiful love of his life, who has taken vows of chastity and therefore cannot marry Romeo. So eventually Benvolio just kind of encourages Romeo to forget about Rosaline and attend the Capulet ball that night instead, so he can find another lovely lady to fixate on. Do Romeo and Benvolio ever officially get invited to the ball? Not quite. We remember the Capulet servant asking the boys to read the invitation list aloud, and Romeo sees Rosaline, and that kind of piques his interest. But the servant does end up inviting the two of them, saying, "Oh, if you're not Montagues, then you're more than welcome to come." But we know the truth of that, right? That dramatic irony there. So meanwhile, Paris is seeking young Juliet Capulet's hand in marriage. Even though the nurse and Mrs. Capulet love Paris and think that he would be a great match for Juliet, Juliet is not quite sure about it yet, and her dad says she's too young. She's 13 years old to be exact, so there's some drama surrounding that. But despite all the drama, the Capulet ball happens, and Romeo, Benvolio, and Mercutio crash it. Juliet's hot-headed cousin Tybalt, remember him, notices that Romeo's there and vows revenge on Romeo for coming. A bit of literary foreshadowing there. There, at the ball though, not before, the ball is over, Romeo and Juliet meet for the first time. It's love at first sight. 2 kisses within 10 lines and not knowing each other's names until the end of the act, when they realize that from that point forward, their fate is sealed. In Act 2, it starts with Benvolio and Mercutio looking for Romeo. They can't find him, but where do we find out he is? Trespassing on the Capulet property, spying creepily on Juliet, who's at the top of her balcony. In one of the most famous scenes in the history of literature, Romeo and Juliet profess their love for each other, curse their names, and make arrangements to get married the next day. We get a lot of the most famous lines in literature here. "Wherefore art thou, Romeo? Why are you the way you are, Romeo? Why are you named Romeo? Swear not on the moon," says Juliet, that inconsistent moon. She wants something steady that he swears his love by. Hopefully we remember some of these lines. From there, Here's Friar Lawrence out with his basket and collecting herbs, and there's Juliet. And there's Romeo. From there, Romeo gets Friar Lawrence to agree to marry the two young lovers, but for political reasons, not because he believes in their relationship. He thinks that this marriage might finally solve the Capulet and Montague crisis in this town. And the nurse, friend of Juliet, also agrees to help set up the details of the wedding with Romeo. Finally, and as you may recall, at the end of Act 2, Romeo and Juliet are finally happily married and nothing could go wrong, right? So this almost takes us up to where we were in the text. Some of my classes, we started Act 3. We were able to read the dramatic Act 3, Scene 1 as a class, and if you remember anything about it, you might remember what I'm referring to. But this is where we'll stop for today. Tomorrow, we'll mostly focus on all of the details of Act 3. These will be mostly new plot points. Hopefully, through summary and activities, we can still make the character interactions and motivations and themes as clear as possible. So that'll be tomorrow. We'll be focusing on Act 3, and we'll worry about that tomorrow. But for today, what are we doing? So before I jump into telling you what we're going to be doing for our assignment for today, I just wanted to show you something that made me really excited and made me think, oh, I can't wait to show my freshmen, right? Because I'm that kind of English teacher. So imagine my delight when I stumbled upon this song by the artist Halsey, and it's called The Prologue. So I start listening to it, and hopefully maybe you can hear it. See if this sounds familiar.
Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge, break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean.
The prologue of Romeo and Juliet. And so I heard that and I said, oh, wow, there's going to be something deeper in that, right? And so I did look it up. And this was on purpose, obviously. Halsey took inspiration for this album, which was called The Hopeless Fountain Kingdom, from Romeo and Juliet. So she makes a lot of references to Romeo and Juliet in the music itself of this album, and also the music videos, which we'll see in a second. So here is just an exact quote. She says, "For me, Hopeless Fountain Kingdom is a story about two people who want to be in love so badly that they're willing to change themselves for their love. And in doing so, they let the real versions of themselves die." So it's a Romeo and Juliet story. Kind of interesting there. Again, references in literature, those are called allusions. So when artists reference other sorts of literary masterpieces in their writing, super interesting, just I thought, and a very interesting bit of trivia to see that these things still exist in today's world, and it's very beneficial to be able to pick up on these to get a greater understanding and appreciation of the other artists who are referencing it. So we have this Halsey music video, Strangers, from a teacher perspective. I'm not recommending that you watch this music video simply because I guess it could be considered a little risque for some, especially for ninth graders, and the subject matter of the songs might be a little risque, whatever. But from a purely literary perspective, I might recommend watching this music video if you were interested. There are so many references to Romeo and Juliet in this, and I just paused here at one of them. So Halsey herself is going to be the one with the blue hair, and she said herself that she plays Romeo in this. So Halsey plays the part of Romeo. Here we see one character named Rosa. Sounds kind of similar to Rosaline, maybe. See if you were to watch this music video, if you could see any references to Romeo and Juliet in it in colors. There's two different families in this, and then something happens at the end, and the character at the end happens to have angel wings on. Who could that character represent? Think about it. It's super interesting. Just a little tidbit that I wanted to share with all of you. But that is kind of unconnected to what we're doing today. I just thought that it was very interesting enough to share. So today's assignment, I call this assignment a Rose by Any Other Name assignment. And if you were with me in person, this is what we'd be doing. But for right now, we're going to do a modified version of this online. So a Rose by Any Other Name. In Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Juliet is upset over the fact that Romeo is a Montague and says that he would, quote, retain that dear perfection without that title. While it might be true that a rose would still smell sweet even if it was called a skunk flower, the name that a person has does often impact his or her personality. We wouldn't be the same if we had another name, perhaps some say. Our names have a lot to do with who we are. And so for this assignment, you're going to be investigating your own name and how it impacts who you are as a person. You should be organizing this into a 2 paragraph essay. I say on here, but I do chunk it differently on today's Google form, so don't worry. Your first paragraph should be about your name itself and how it was chosen for you. So research the origins and meaning of your name. How closely does your name, how closely does your personality fit with the meaning of your name? If you don't already know and or are interested, talk to your parents or guardians. Find out how your name was chosen if you know. If you were named after someone important, like a family member, a grandma, a grandpa, has this had an impact on who you are? Your second paragraph should talk about your opinions about your name. Do you like it? Do you not care for it? Do you think that names do, in fact, have value in shaping who a person is? Would you rename yourself if given the opportunity to do so? And what would you rename yourself? How has your name shaped your personality? So, for instance, if your name's William, but people call you Billy, do you think that that changes your perception of your maturity level? Do people think, like, oh, Billy is younger, right? A younger person. Have fun with this, give it some serious thought, and then just use proper English conventions and explain things clearly. This is actually one of my favorite assignments to read of students. I think that you put a lot of stake into your names and you put a lot of stake into this assignment and you really care about it and kind of think about it deeply. Like I said, this has been one of my favorite assignments to read that students have submitted to me, so I'm excited to see what you all have to say. As an example, I did kind of pull up my name and what my name means. So my first name is Kelly. It says it's a Gaelic baby name with the meaning warrior. So in the name Kelly, war, lively, aggressive. So when I look that up, I look at this assignment and it says research the origins, meanings of your name. Does it fit your personality or meaning of your name? In my opinion, it does. You students might not have seen that side of me before, but I am pretty competitive. I am pretty fierce. I do have a lot of energy and liveliness and dedication. So I would say, yeah, maybe my name does fit who I am as a person. I have no idea why my parents or guardians chose this name for me. They said they just liked the name Kelly. However, I could throw in something about the way my name is spelt because it is different than the way I've seen a lot of other Kelly spelt with a Y. So my name is commonly misspelt, and that's okay. It's just something that I've kind of adjusted to over time, but it did bother me when I was younger. So I might have written something about how I feel, I mean, my name is annoying, right? Something like that. But it kind of does shape you when you go into a souvenir shop and can't find your name on one of the keychains. How does it affect you, right? Second paragraph, opinions on my name. So I suppose I was kind of answering these questions more. But do I like or care for my name? Now I like it. Do you think that names do, in fact, have a value in shaping who I am as a person? Um, that's, I guess, an opinion. I would say probably not as much of an impact on me as a person, but if it was a name like very important to my family, like if it was a family name, I was a junior, or if I was a third or a fourth, I think that that might shape me as a person a little bit differently. I really didn't have a lot of nicknames. Maybe I could talk about how Kelly rhymes with belly or something like that. And so maybe you kind of associate it as a more childish sort of name, or jelly. Um, so think I could write anything, right? And so you can write anything. And so feel free to kind of get inspired by that, research your name in great detail, kind of figure out why you were named the way that you were, and see if you agree with some of the stuff. So finally, today's full assignment. Tuesday, April 28th assignment. What's your name? So you can get credit for today. If you happen to watch the music video Strangers that I mentioned today, what other references to Romeo and Juliet might you have seen besides just the Rosa on the back of the shirt? If you don't watch it, that's okay. This question is not one of the required questions. Just kind of curious if you were curious too and you looked into that music video. There's a whole series of music videos too from this album that go into it. It's in the comments section. Somebody kind of commented the order you can watch them. So if you're super curious, you can watch the whole thing. It's kind of interesting. Up to the point I recapped earlier in today's video. So at the beginning of it, when I talked about acts basically 1 and 2, do you have any questions or confusion about the plot of Romeo and Juliet so far? Let me know. Finally, research the origins and meaning of your name. I recommend here don't use Urban Dictionary. Those are just people made definitions of your name. They're not like the actual Greek, Latin, Irish, etc. translations. So look for kind of a reputable source here. How closely does your personality fit with the meaning of your name? If you don't already know or are interested, talk to your parents or guardians, find out how your name was chosen. Write a nice paragraph here. And what's your opinion of your own name? Do you like it, not care for it? Do you think that names do have value in shaping a person? Would you rename yourself if given the opportunity to do so? And what would you rename yourself? How has your name shaped your personality? Write a response here. Finally, in your opinion, if Romeo and Juliet came from different families, i.e., if they had different names, would there then be no problem with them being together? Is their names the only obstacle standing between them? Explain. This is an opinion question. You can't be wrong. Just kind of curious what you think. Finally, I acknowledge that I will get any relevant links and the name assignment via email today, per usual. Check that off if you agree. And then obviously, any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. Tomorrow we are going to be transitioning into Act 3 of Romeo and Juliet, some new material. Hope you're all excited about that. And that's all I have for you today. So fill out this Google form. Don't forget to hit submit. Any questions, comments, concerns, let me know. And talk to you tomorrow. Bye, guys.